A very good morning to you all. So, today's topic is we are studying the hormones secreted by adrenal gland. So, regarding adrenal gland, we have two parts in adrenal gland, that is adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. So, in adrenal cortex, first of all we are studying the hormones secreted by adrenal cortex. So, as shown in the picture, the adrenal cortex consists of three zones, that is one zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata and zona reticularis. And the zona glomerulosa synthesize and secrete mineralocorticoid, zona fasciculata synthesize and secrete glucocorticoids and reticularis androgens. So, in this video we are studying about the functions and disorders associated with the hormones by zona glomerulosa. Okay. So, as you all know, the zona glomerulosa secrete the hormone mineralocorticoids. So, coming to the mineralocorticoids, you all know it is a steroid in nature. Coming to the chemistry of mineralocorticoid, usually we have two types of mineralocorticoid, aldosterone and 11-deoxycorticosterone, of which the principal mineralocorticoid is aldosterone, because 90% of the activity of mineralocorticoid is by aldosterone. And coming to the chemistry, I hope you remember the structure of steroids. It is a cyclopentanoperhydrophenanthrin ring and it is a C21 steroid. So, as you all know, the mother molecule of all steroids are cholesterol. So, cholesterol is the precursor molecule for this aldosterone. And coming to the half-life of mineralocorticoid is 20 minutes. And coming to the biosynthesis of mineralocorticoid, it is a principal steroid is cholesterol, or the precursor molecule is cholesterol. So, the cholesterol you have already studied about the biosynthesis, scheme of synthesis of steroid hormones in the chapter cholesterol metabolism. So, cholesterol is converted to pregnenolone, progesterone, then 11-deoxycorticosterone, corticosterone and aldosterone. You have to study the scheme of synthesis, transportation. So, the mineralocorticoid is synthesized in zona glomerulosa, it is secreted into the circulation. So, being a lipid soluble or water insoluble molecule, this steroid hormone require a transporter. So, plasma protein act as a transporter. 55% of the mineralocorticoid is bound to the plasma protein, rest is free, which is the biologically active form. So, in the target organ, its mode of action is, we have studied in the classification of hormones about the group 1 hormones. I hope you remember all these portions. So, in the target organ being lipid soluble, this aldosterone can easily pass through the plasma membrane. So, in the cytoplasm they have cytoplasmic receptors are there. So, the hormone binds with the cytoplasmic receptor, it forms a hormone responsive element, goes to the nucleus, and in the nucleus it activates specific DNA for transcription, and it activates transcription, then translation and synthesize the proteins which can perform the functions of aldosterone. Okay, so principal one is, as you all know, sodium potassium ATPase, it helps in the transport of exchange of sodium and potassium between ECF and ICF. Okay. Then coming to the functions, As it's another name for mineralocorticoid is it is a life saving hormone. So, life saving hormone, and also it is called a mineralocorticoid. Mineralocorticoid means it is concerned with the mineral metabolism, especially the metabolism of sodium and potassium. So, if there is imbalance in sodium potassium balance, so what will happen, that we have already studied in the functions of sodium and potassium. Coming to the major functions, the main function is concerned with the maintenance of sodium potassium. So, the important functions are reabsorption of sodium from the tubules, excretion of potassium through renal tubules, and secretion of hydrogen ions, so that the acid base balances pH of the plasma is maintained. Coming to the first function on action of sodium ions. As we all know, sodium ion, when the sodium osmolality, I hope you remember osmolality. Osmolality means number of solute present per kg of the solvent is osmolality. So, usually the osmolality is mainly dependent on sodium. So, when the sodium level decreases, automatically the osmolality decreases, and this concentration, when sodium decreases, automatically potassium will increase. So, this will activate the secretion of aldosterone. So, what aldosterone does is that it acts in the renal tubules for the reabsorption of sodium in exchange of potassium, so that the osmolality is maintained. So, along with sodium, a small water is also reabsorbed along with sodium, and chloride. It also helps in the reabsorption of chlorides. So, the pH ECF volume automatically, when the water is also reabsorbed, ECF volume is maintained. Increases ECF volume and increases blood pressure. So, these are the effect of aldosterone on sodium. That is why I am repeating once more, that is in the renal tubules, aldosterone activate the reabsorption of sodium from the tubules. Along with sodium, the water is also reabsorbed, so that osmolality is increased and also ECF volume is increased, so that the blood pressure increases. So, next on potassium ions. So, we have studied it is an mainly an ICF cation. So, sodium is reabsorbed at the expense of potassium. So, usually we all know the level of potassium in ECF is around 3.5 to 5 milliequivalent per liter. So, automatically when sodium is reabsorbed into the ECF, potassium goes to ICF. Okay. So, it is, and it also helps in the secretion of, if high potassium is there, it helps in the excretion of potassium. So, that is the role of aldosterone on potassium. Then in exchange of sodium, potassium is secreted. Coming to the hydrogen ions, when we study the next chapter, acid base balance, you will be clear about the role of hydrogen ion and so relationship between hydrogen ion and sodium. When in the lumen, when sodium is reabsorbed, in exchange it helps in the elimination of more hydrogen ions, so that the acid base balance is maintained. That is, always hydrogen ion is secreted in exchange of sodium. So, by altogether function, the sodium level in the ECF is maintained and ECF volume is maintained, and also it helps in the acid base balance by eliminating more hydrogen ions, ammonium ions, etc. So, it has minor actions on gastrointestinal tract and sweat glands. That is, in the gastrointestinal tract, aldosterone activate the absorption of sodium, and in the sweat glands it activate the reabsorption of sodium, so that always the sodium level is elevated. That is the main purpose of aldosterone, is increase the level of sodium in ECF. Okay. Then this figure represents the overall functions of aldosterone. From this figure you can see the tubular cells, interstitial fluid and tubular lumen. So, in the tubular cells, by the help of sodium potassium ATPase, sodium enters into the ECF and potassium in exchange potassium moves to the ICF, so that the sodium level is increased. In the lumen side, in exchange when sodium is reabsorbed, in exchange hydrogen ion is secreted into the lumen, so that the acid base balance is maintained. This is the another figure represents the deficiency of aldosterone. What happens if the aldosterone level decreases? Because we said aldosterone is a life saving hormone. That this figure represents why it is called a life saving hormone. Because when there is deficiency of aldosterone, the potassium level increases, and another side there is sodium level decreasing. So, when the potassium level is increasing, it is mainly the potassium level influences the cardiac function, muscle activity, that we have already studied in potassium metabolism. So, when hyperkalemia leads to cardiac toxicity, leading to arrhythmia and cardiac death. When sodium level decreases, what happens? The ECF volume decreases, blood pressure decreases, it leads to cardiac dysfunction and may lead to death. That is why it is called a life saving hormone. Then coming to the regulation of aldosterone, as we have already studied, every molecule in the body, even if it is a hormone or enzyme, it is regulated. So, here the regulation, depending on the need, we have to regulate the secretion of aldosterone. The three important factors which regulate the aldosterone secretions are increase in potassium ion, that is hyperkalemia, decrease in sodium and decrease in ECF volume, and to some extent ACTH also influences the regulation of aldosterone synthesis and secretion. So, this figure represents the scheme of regulation, how it is positively stimulated and negatively inhibited. So, coming to the stimulation, as we have studied, increase in the potassium level, decrease in the sodium and decrease in the ECF activate the angiotensinogen. We have already studied in the chapter protein metabolism or biologically important peptides about angiotensin. So, angiotensinogen is the inactive form which is synthesized and secreted by liver. So, when the potassium level increases, sodium decreases, it activates the juxtaglomerular cells of the kidney to secrete renin. So, renin in turn activate on angiotensinogen, converting it into angiotensinogen 1. Then and by another enzyme called the converting enzyme secreted by lungs activate on angiotensinogen 1 to converted into angiotensinogen 2. This activated angiotensinogen 2, which contains 8 amino acid, activate the adrenal cortex for the synthesis and secretion of aldosterone. And this aldosterone act on kidney and increases the reabsorption of sodium, increases the excretion of potassium and absorption of water, so that in the ECF potassium level decreases, sodium and water level increases, that is increases sodium level and increases ECF volume and increases blood pressure. So, when all these level increases, automatically suppress the secretion of renin, so that no more aldosterone is secreted and always the ECF volume, sodium level and BP is maintained. So, this is the mechanism of action of aldosterone. Okay. So, we have studied the functions, synthesis and also the regulation of aldosterone. Then coming to the last portion, that is disorders. Actually, coming to the disorders of aldosterone, it is mainly concerned with hypersecretion of aldosterone or hyposecretion of aldosterone. Actually, it is a cortical hormone. Whenever there is a defect in the adrenal cortex, the secretions will be altered. Here, I am mainly talking about the aldosterone, because one of the major cause hyperaldosteronism. Hyperaldosteronism means there is increased secretion of aldosterone, so that it acts on aldosterone by adrenal gland. So, usually it is divided into two as primary hyperaldosteronism and secondary hyperaldosteronism. I hope you remember the primary secondary differentiation. Primary hyperaldosteronism means when the defect is with adrenal cortex or zona glomerulosa. It is so defect is primary organ, that is adrenal gland. That is why it is called a primary hyperaldosteronism. Then secondary hyperaldosteronism means the cause is something related with renin or nothing related with adrenal gland, that is adrenal gland is normal, it is something related with other cause like hyperactivity of the renin or like that. So, first one is primary hyperaldosteronism. It is also called Conn syndrome because the cause is with adrenal gland. It is mainly found in tumors in zona glomerulosa or any tumor or carcinoma in the zona glomerulosa, so that more aldosterone is synthesized and secreted. So, from the functions we can identify the symptoms will be. Okay. So, aldosterone is mainly concerned with the sodium metabolism. It increases the sodium level. So, whenever there is hypersecretion of aldosterone, automatically there will be more reabsorption of sodium. So, leading to hypernatremia and increased blood pressure. And another feature is hypokalemia, because when more aldosterone is secreted, that means more potassium will be lost. So, leading to hypokalemia. This hypokalemia may lead to polydipsia, polyuria and nocturia. So, another feature of hyperaldosteronism is alkalosis. Alkalosis means the plasma pH is increasing, that is alkalinity is increasing. One of the function of aldosterone is reabsorption of secretion of hydrogen ions in exchange of sodium. So, when more aldosterone is there, so it will absorb more sodium, in exchange more hydrogen ion will be lost through urine, which leads to increase in the plasma pH, leading to alkalosis. So, another features is muscle weakness, fatigue and headache due to the imbalance in water balance and acid base balance. So, these are the clinical features of hyperaldosteronism. Coming to the secondary hyperaldosteronism, here that adrenal gland is normal. The cause resides in something related with renin secretion or angiotensin secretion, etc. So, usually it is symptoms are same, and the causes may be the block or narrowing in the renal artery or renin secreting tumors or secondary to diseases like congestive cardiac failure. So, these are all about the disorders associated with hypersecretion of aldosterone. Okay, thank you.